There comes a moment in every human life when the invisible currents of cosmic law begin to align in such a way that what was once mere potential transforms into undeniable power. You may have felt it already, that subtle shift in your being, that inexplicable sense that something fundamental has changed within you, though you cannot yet name what it is. Perhaps you have noticed that your dreams have become more vivid, more symbolic, carrying messages that seem to come from a source deeper than your conscious mind. Perhaps you have found yourself drawn to knowledge you once dismissed, to books gathering dust on forgotten shelves, to conversations about matters that transcend the material plane. Perhaps most tellingly, you have begun to question everything you once accepted without thought, feeling an urgent need to understand the true nature of your existence and your place in the grand design of the universe. These are not random occurrences, my friends. These are the unmistakable signatures of a profound spiritual transformation, the signs that you are approaching what the ancient mystery schools called the threshold of personal power, that sacred juncture where the aspirant becomes the adept, where the seeker transforms into the knower. Manly Palmer Hall spent his extraordinary life studying the wisdom traditions of humanity, from the sunlit temples of ancient Egypt to the mountain monasteries of Tibet, from the secret chambers of European alchemists to the sacred groves where druids once gathered beneath starlit skies. Throughout all these diverse traditions, he discovered a remarkable consensus, a universal recognition that human life unfolds according to spiritual laws as precise and immutable as the physical laws governing the movement of planets. These traditions all recognize that within each lifetime there emerges a particular period, a window of opportunity, when the individual soul reaches a level of maturity sufficient to receive and wield genuine spiritual power. This is not the power of domination over others, not the power that corrupts and diminishes, but rather the power of self-mastery, the power to consciously direct your own evolution, the power to become a beneficial presence in the world, a bearer of light in times of darkness. The ancients understood that this power does not arrive suddenly or arbitrarily, but announces itself through specific signs, through unmistakable indicators that the initiated could recognize and interpret. The first and perhaps most profound sign is what Hall described as the awakening of spiritual discontent. You begin to feel a deep, persistent dissatisfaction with the superficial life, with the endless pursuit of material acquisitions and social validations that once seemed so important. This is not depression, though it may be mistaken for it by those who do not understand the spiritual dimensions of human experience. Rather, it is the soul's rebellion against continued imprisonment in illusion, its refusal to remain satisfied with shadows when it has begun to glimpse the reality that casts those shadows. The Hermetic philosophers spoke of this as the moment when the lead of ignorance begins its slow transformation into the gold of wisdom. In Buddhist teaching, this corresponds to the arising of bodhicitta, that spontaneous desire for liberation not merely for oneself, but for all sentient beings. The Kabbalistic tradition recognizes it as the awakening of the divine spark within, that fragment of infinite consciousness that has been slumbering beneath layers of worldly concerns and egoic preoccupations. You may find yourself unable to engage with trivial conversations as you once did, unable to pretend interest in matters that now seem utterly inconsequential. Your friends and family may notice this change in you, may even express concern that you have become too serious, too withdrawn, too different from the person they thought they knew. But this is merely the natural consequence of your consciousness expanding beyond its former boundaries, reaching toward truths that most people spend their entire lives avoiding. Closely related to this spiritual discontent is the second sign, which manifests as an intensification of synchronicity in your life. Carl Jung, who was deeply influenced by esoteric traditions and who studied extensively with spiritual teachers, coined this term to describe meaningful coincidences, those moments when the outer world seems to mirror or respond to your inner state in ways that probability alone cannot explain. As you enter this powerful phase of your existence, you will notice that synchronicities multiply dramatically. You think of someone you have not spoken to in years, and within hours they contact you. You need guidance on a particular problem, and you randomly open a book to find the exact passage that addresses your concern. You overhear conversations that seem tailored specifically to answer questions you have been contemplating in private. The ancient mystery schools taught that these are not mere coincidences, but rather evidence that you have begun to align with what they called the cosmic mind. the universal intelligence that orchestrates all phenomena according to patterns of meaning rather than mechanical cause and effect. As your consciousness rises to meet higher frequencies of awareness, the membrane separating your inner world from the outer world becomes increasingly permeable. You become like a tuning fork that has found its proper resonance, and the universe responds by sending confirmations, by opening doors, by arranging encounters and circumstances that further your spiritual development. Hall emphasized that this phenomenon intensifies precisely because you are being prepared for greater responsibilities, because the universe is testing your readiness to work consciously with subtle forces that govern manifestation itself. The third unmistakable sign emerges in your relationship to suffering and adversity. Where you once reacted to difficulties with frustration, resentment, or despair, you now begin to perceive challenges as initiatory tests, as opportunities for the refinement of your character and the strengthening of your spiritual resolve. This represents a fundamental shift in consciousness, a movement from passive victimhood to active participation in your own transformation. The ancient Stoics understood this principle deeply, teaching that external circumstances possess only the meaning and power we assign to them. The Christian mystics spoke of the dark night of the soul, those periods of intense trial that precede profound spiritual illumination. In the Eastern traditions, the concept of karma is not merely about reward and punishment, but about the soul's education, about the precise arrangement of experiences necessary for consciousness to evolve. When you find yourself able to face loss, betrayal, illness, or failure without losing your center, without abandoning your commitment to truth and integrity, you demonstrate that you have developed what the alchemists called the philosophical mercury, that quality of consciousness that remains fluid and adaptable while maintaining its essential nature. You begin to understand that suffering is not meaningless, but rather the friction necessary for spiritual growth, the resistance that builds strength, the darkness that teaches you to generate your own light. This does not mean you seek suffering or romanticize pain, but rather that you have developed the capacity to extract wisdom from every experience, to transform even the most difficult circumstances into fuel for your continued evolution. Neste momento, permita que eu faça uma pausa na nossa exploração dos mistérios espirituais para perguntar algo que talvez ninguém tenha realmente te perguntado antes. Quando você olha para dentro nas horas de silêncio, quando ninguém mais está observando, qual é o vazio espiritual que mais ecoa em seu ser? Aquela busca que você talvez nunca tenha compartilhado em voz alta? Sabe, muitas almas caminham por décadas carregando perguntas não respondidas, buscando conexões mais profundas em silêncio, acreditando estarem sozinhas em sua jornada. Mas você não está sozinho. Há inúmeras outras pessoas assistindo agora que sentem exatamente o mesmo chamado interior. Se você se sentir confortável, compartilhe nos comentários sua própria jornada espiritual, os sinais que você tem reconhecido em sua vida, ou simplesmente deixe uma palavra que resuma o que sua alma mais busca neste momento. Seu comentário pode ser exatamente a luz que outra pessoa precisa para dar o próximo passo em seu despertar. The fourth sign that Hall identified manifests in your changing relationship to time itself. You begin to experience moments when linear time seems to dissolve, when past, present, and future feel somehow simultaneous, when you access memories that do not belong to your current lifetime, or experience premonitions of events yet to unfold. The rational mind may attempt to dismiss these experiences as imagination or wishful thinking, but they arrive with a quality of knowing that transcends belief. The ancient Egyptians possessed sophisticated teachings about the nature of time, understanding it not as a river flowing in one direction, but as an eternal present from which different moments of experience emerge. The Hindu concept of the eternal now, the Buddhist teaching of the timeless Dharma, the mystical Christian understanding of Kairos versus Chronos, all point to the same essential truth that consciousness itself exists outside the temporal dimension, even while operating through it. As you enter your period of greatest power, you begin to access what the Theosophists called the Akashic Records, that cosmic memory bank where every thought, word, and deed throughout all of history remains eternally preserved. You may experience this as intuitive knowing about historical events, as understanding of ancient wisdom teachings without having studied them, or as the ability to perceive the likely outcomes of present actions by sensing their ripples through time. This expanded temporal awareness serves a crucial purpose in your development, For how can you wield true power if you remain trapped in the illusion of linear causality, if you cannot perceive the deeper patterns that connect seemingly separate moments into a coherent whole? The fifth sign appears in the realm of relationships and manifests as what might be called the Great Sorting. People who once seemed central to your life begin to drift away, not through conflict or conscious rejection, but through a natural process of vibrational mismatch. Simultaneously, new individuals appear who resonate with your emerging frequency. People who understand your journey without lengthy explanations, who support your transformation, rather than attempting to pull you back into familiar patterns. This can be one of the most challenging aspects of spiritual awakening, for the human heart naturally desires to maintain all its connections, to carry everyone along on the journey of growth. But the ancient wisdom traditions are unanimous in their teaching that as consciousness evolves, certain relationships must be released to make space for new alliances more appropriate to your current level of development. The Pythagorean schools carefully selected their students, recognizing that spiritual work requires companions who share similar aspirations and commitments. The monastic traditions of both East and West understood that serious spiritual practice necessitates a protected environment where seekers can support one another without the constant pull of worldly concerns. This does not mean you abandon compassion for those operating at different frequencies, but rather that you recognize the practical necessity of spending your time and energy with those who can truly accompany you on the path you are walking. Hall observed that many aspirants fail to fully claim their power because they remain entangled in relationships that drain their vitality, that constantly require them to explain or defend choices that should be self-evident, that pull them back toward conformity with collective mediocrity. The sixth sign manifests in your physical body and energy field. You may notice increased sensitivity to environments, to the emotional states of others, to substances and foods that you once consumed without difficulty. Your need for sleep may change dramatically, either increasing as your system processes deep transformations or decreasing as you access higher energy sources. You might experience unusual sensations along your spine, tingling in your extremities, pressure in your forehead between and slightly above your eyes where the pineal gland resides, or heat moving through your body in ways unrelated to external temperature. The yogic traditions have mapped these experiences with extraordinary precision, describing the awakening of Kundalini energy, that primordial force that lies coiled at the base of the spine until spiritual development reaches a point where it can safely be activated. The Taoist alchemists spoke of circulating the microcosmic orbit, moving qi through specific channels to integrate body and spirit. The Christian mystics described ecstatic experiences, moments when divine energy filled their physical form to the point of overwhelming their ordinary consciousness. These are not metaphors but descriptions of actual energetic phenomena that occur when spiritual practice reaches sufficient intensity. Hall cautioned that these experiences must be approached with wisdom and discernment, for the premature or uncontrolled awakening of subtle energies can create serious difficulties. However, when they arise naturally as part of a balanced spiritual development, they indicate that your consciousness is preparing to operate from a higher octave, that the very substance of your being is being refined to hold and transmit greater light. The seventh sign emerges in your creative and intellectual capacities. You find yourself able to perceive connections between disparate fields of knowledge that others miss entirely, able to synthesize information in novel ways, able to solve problems that previously seemed intractable. Ideas come to you with unusual clarity and completeness, sometimes arriving fully formed as though downloaded from a source beyond your individual mind. This is what the ancient Greeks called inspiration, the breathing in of divine intelligence, what the muses were said to bestow upon those who had properly prepared themselves to receive higher knowledge. The medieval alchemists worked in their laboratories not merely to transmute physical substances, but to create within themselves the capacity to receive illumination directly from the cosmic mind. The Renaissance concept of genius was understood not as mere talent, but as connection to one's personal demon or guiding spirit, that higher aspect of self that possesses knowledge unavailable to ordinary consciousness. In the Kabbalistic framework, this corresponds to building the channel between your human consciousness and your neshama, the divine soul that connects you directly to the source of all wisdom. When you enter your period of greatest power, this channel becomes increasingly clear and strong, allowing you to function as what Hall called a conscious agent of the divine plan, someone capable of bringing through into manifestation ideas and energies that serve the evolution of collective consciousness. The eighth sign manifests as an increasing capacity for solitude without loneliness. Where isolation once created anxiety or restlessness, you now find that time alone has become not merely tolerable, but deeply nourishing, even essential to your well-being. This represents a crucial development, for all genuine spiritual power is cultivated in silence. In those hours when external stimulation ceases and you can turn your full attention inward toward the depths of your own being. The desert fathers and mothers of early Christianity withdrew from civilization not from misanthropy, but from recognition that communion with the divine requires freedom from constant social demands and distractions. The Buddhist tradition emphasizes meditation retreats, extended periods when practitioners can immerse themselves fully in the work of examining and transforming consciousness. The shamanic traditions speak of vision quests, of going alone into the wilderness to encounter the spirits and receive guidance unavailable in ordinary social contexts. Hall himself spent countless hours in his library, in deep study and contemplation, recognizing that the pearls of wisdom can only be found by those willing to dive into the ocean depths rather than remaining on the surface where the crowds gather. When you find yourself craving solitude, when you actively protect time for contemplation and inner work, when you can sit comfortably with your own presence for extended periods, you demonstrate that you have developed an inner life rich enough to sustain you, that you have discovered the inexhaustible companionship of your own higher self. Before we continue deeper into these profound recognitions, I want to take a moment to ask you something. If this exploration is resonating with your own experience, if you are recognizing these signs in your own journey, please take a second to like this video. Your engagement helps this wisdom reach others who are searching for exactly this understanding, others who are experiencing these transformations but may not yet have the framework to comprehend what is happening to them. And if you have not yet subscribed to this channel, please do so now and activate the notification bell. We are building a community of awakening souls, individuals who recognize that there is more to existence than material success and social approval, people who are committed to their own evolution and to contributing positively to the transformation of collective consciousness. Your presence here is not accidental, and your participation in this community matters more than you might realize. The ninth sign appears in your moral and ethical sensibilities. You develop what might be called a natural integrity, a spontaneous alignment with truth and right action that no longer requires constant deliberation or willpower. This does not mean you become rigidly moralistic or judgmental of others, but rather that you simply lose interest in behaviors that diminish your light or create unnecessary complications. The Confucian tradition speaks of the superior man who acts virtuously, not from fear of punishment or desire for reward, but because virtue has become his nature. The Islamic concept of ihsan describes a state where one worships God as though seeing him, or at least with the awareness of being seen, creating a constant consciousness of the sacred dimension of all actions. The ancient Stoics cultivated ataraxia, that state of inner tranquility that arises when one lives in accordance with nature and reason, rather than being buffeted by passions and appetites. When you reach this level of development, ethics cease to be a set of external rules imposed by society or religion, and become instead the natural expression of your understanding of interconnectedness, your recognition that what you do to another, you ultimately do to yourself, because at the deepest level there is no true separation between self and other. Hall emphasized that genuine power can only be safely wielded by those who have developed this moral foundation, for without it, power inevitably corrupts, becoming an instrument of ego gratification rather than service to the greater good. The 10th sign manifests in your relationship to fear. While you do not become reckless or foolhardy, you notice that many of the anxieties that once controlled your choices have lost their grip on your psyche. The fear of others' opinions, the fear of failure, the fear of loss, even the fear of death itself, begin to diminish as you recognize them as constructs of the ego mind, rather than reflections of ultimate reality. The Egyptian Book of the Dead was not actually about physical death, but about the death of the false self, the ego structure that must dissolve before the eternal self can be known. The Tibetan Buddhist teachings on the Bardos describe not only the transition after bodily death, but also the many deaths and rebirths that occur throughout a lifetime as old identities and attachments are released. The Western mystery traditions speak of symbolic death and resurrection, of descending into the underworld like Osiris or Persephone, and returning transformed, stripped of superficial concerns, and reconnected to essential being. When you enter your period of greatest power, you do so precisely because you have begun to identify with that in you, which cannot die, that eternal witness consciousness that observes the coming and going of all phenomena without being diminished or destroyed. This shift in identification from the temporary to the eternal liberates enormous energy that was previously bound up in defensive maneuvers and protective strategies. You can now act from vision rather than from fear, can take calculated risks in service of your purpose rather than playing it safe to avoid imagined catastrophes. The 11th sign appears in your capacity for focused attention and sustained concentration. In an age of constant distraction and fragmented awareness, you discover an ability to marshal your mental forces, to direct your attention precisely where you choose and hold it there for extended periods. This is no small accomplishment in our contemporary world, where technological systems are specifically designed to capture and commodify attention, to keep consciousness perpetually skipping across surfaces rather than penetrating depths. The Raja Yoga tradition of Patanjali describes dharana, concentration, as an essential step toward dhyana, meditation, and ultimately samadhi, that state of unified consciousness where subject and object dissolve into pure awareness. The Hermetic principle of mentalism teaches that all causation is mental, that the universe itself is a mental construct, which means that developing mastery over your own mind is developing the fundamental capacity to shape reality itself. When you can choose what you think about, when you can refuse to be swept away by every passing impulse and reaction, when you can maintain focus on your spiritual aims despite the endless seductions and demands of the world, you wield a power that most people never develop. Hall noted that the greatest ideas and achievements throughout human history have always come from individuals who possessed this capacity for intense concentration, who could hold their attention on a problem or vision long enough for insight to emerge and inspiration to strike. The 12th sign manifests in your relationship to knowledge and wisdom. You begin to understand the profound difference between mere information accumulation and genuine knowing, between intellectual understanding and embodied realization. You may find yourself less interested in collecting facts and more devoted to integrating and living the truths you have already encountered. This reflects a shift from horizontal learning, the endless accumulation of conceptual knowledge, to vertical learning, the deepening of experiential understanding. The Gnostic traditions emphasized gnosis, direct knowing of the divine as opposed to pistis, mere belief in doctrines. The Zen Buddhist tradition speaks of satori, that sudden awakening where intellectual understanding gives way to direct perception of reality as it is. The Sufi mystics described fana, the annihilation of the false self, and bhaka, the subsistence in God, movements that can only occur when knowledge ceases to be something you possess and becomes instead what you are. When you reach this stage of development, you realize that the purpose of studying sacred texts and wisdom teachings is not to fill your mind with more concepts, but to ignite the spark of recognition, to awaken the wisdom that already dwells within you, waiting to be remembered. You become less concerned with knowing everything and more focused on knowing the one thing needful, that essential truth from which all other understanding flows naturally. The 13th sign appears in your capacity for paradox and contradiction. The rational mind seeks consistency and abhors ambiguity, always trying to categorize experiences as either this or that, as good or bad, as true or false. But as you evolve spiritually, you develop what the poet John Keats called negative capability, the ability to exist in uncertainties, mysteries, and doubts without irritably reaching after fact and reason. You begin to recognize that ultimate truth cannot be captured in concepts or reduced to logical propositions, that it necessarily transcends and includes apparent opposites. The Taoist symbol of yin and yang illustrates this principle perfectly, showing how darkness contains light and light contains darkness, how each extreme gives birth to its opposite in an eternal dance of transformation. The Hindu concept of Brahman is described as neti neti, not this, not that, pointing to a reality that cannot be grasped by the conceptual mind. The Christian mystical tradition speaks of the coincidentia oppositorum, the coincidence of opposites in God, where mercy and justice, transcendence and immanence, unity and multiplicity somehow coexist without contradiction. When you can hold paradox without collapsing it prematurely into false certainty, when you can tolerate the tension of not knowing while remaining open to deeper revelation, you demonstrate a level of psychological and spiritual maturity that few attain. This capacity allows you to access wisdom unavailable to those who remain trapped in rigid either-or thinking, who cannot see that the truth is almost always more subtle and complex than our categories suggest. The 14th sign manifests in your dreams and the liminal states of consciousness between waking and sleeping. You may notice that your dreams become more coherent and meaningful, sometimes offering explicit guidance or revealing information about situations you are facing in waking life. You might experience lucid dreams where you become aware that you are dreaming and can consciously navigate the dream landscape. You may have encounters with figures who seem to be more than mere projections of your psyche, who communicate teachings or initiate you into higher levels of understanding. The ancient mystery schools conducted their most sacred initiations during altered states of consciousness, recognizing that certain truths can only be conveyed when ordinary awareness is temporarily suspended. The Aboriginal Australians speak of the dream time as a realm more real than waking reality, a dimension where the eternal patterns that structure existence can be directly perceived and engaged. The shamanic traditions throughout the world have always emphasized the importance of journeying into non-ordinary reality, to retrieve power, to gain wisdom, to heal illness, to maintain right relationship between the human community and the larger web of life. When your consciousness is evolving rapidly, the boundary between different states of awareness becomes more permeable, allowing information and energy to flow more freely between dimensions. You may find that insights arising during meditation or contemplation have the same quality of revelatory power as those that come in dreams, that your intuition speaks with increasing clarity and reliability, that you sense the presence of guides or guardians who are assisting your development from subtle realms beyond ordinary perception. The 15th and perhaps most definitive sign is the emergence of what Hall called the philosophic life. This does not refer to being an academic philosopher or to spending your time in abstract speculation, but rather to a fundamental reorientation of your entire existence around the pursuit of wisdom and the embodiment of higher principles. Where you once lived according to the dictates of social conditioning, family expectations, or instinctual drives, you now make choices based on your understanding of universal law and your commitment to your soul's evolution. You begin to see your life as a work of art in progress, as a sacred text being written one choice at a time, as an initiation ritual where every challenge and opportunity serves the purpose of revealing and refining your true nature. The Platonic tradition understood the philosopher as one who loves wisdom, who orders their life around the contemplation of eternal forms, rather than the pursuit of temporal pleasures. The Stoic philosophers lived according to the principle of living in accordance with nature, accepting what cannot be changed while taking responsibility for what lies within their power. The Buddhist Bodhisattva vow represents this same reorientation, the commitment to work for the liberation of all beings and to use every circumstance as an opportunity for practice. When you have truly entered your period of greatest power, your life becomes seamlessly integrated, no longer compartmentalized into spiritual time versus worldly time, sacred space versus profane space. Instead, everything becomes part of the great work of consciousness awakening to itself, of the divine remembering its own nature through your individual experience. These 15 signs do not all appear simultaneously, nor do they manifest in exactly the same way for every individual. The path of awakening is simultaneously universal in its essential patterns and utterly unique in its specific expression through each person's particular circumstances, karma, and destiny. What remains consistent across all genuine spiritual development is that you will recognize these signs when they appear in your life. They will arrive not as vague possibilities or wishful thinking, but as undeniable realities that restructure your entire experience of existence. Hall emphasized throughout his teachings that spiritual power is not something you acquire from outside yourself, but rather something you uncover within yourself as the veils of illusion are progressively removed. The mystery schools of antiquity did not create spiritual capacities in their initiates, but rather created conditions where those capacities could safely emerge and be properly integrated. Understanding these signs serves multiple purposes in your spiritual development. First, it provides confirmation that you are indeed on the right path, that the changes you are experiencing are not signs of pathology or delusion, but rather indicators of authentic transformation. In a world that often pathologizes spiritual experience, that tries to reduce all non-ordinary states to neurochemistry or wish fulfillment, it becomes crucial to have a framework for recognizing legitimate spiritual development. Second, this knowledge allows you to work more consciously with the processes that are unfolding within you, rather than being passively carried along by forces you do not understand. When you recognize that your increasing sensitivity is part of your energetic development, you can take steps to protect and manage your energy, rather than feeling overwhelmed by it. When you understand that relationship changes are a natural part of raising your frequency, you can navigate those transitions with less guilt and more grace. Third, awareness of these signs helps you avoid certain pitfalls that trap many seekers. The spiritual path is strewn with what Tibetan Buddhism calls demons, not supernatural entities, but rather psychological and spiritual obstacles that appear precisely because you are making progress. Pride can arise when you begin to experience enhanced capacities, tempting you to see yourself as special or superior, rather than recognizing that all humans possess these potentials. Impatience can emerge when development seems to slow or plateau, causing you to grasp for experiences or to hop from teacher to teacher rather than deepening your practice. Spiritual materialism can creep in, where you collect experiences and attainments like trophies rather than allowing them to genuinely transform you. The timing of when you enter this powerful phase varies considerably between individuals. For some, it arrives relatively early in life, perhaps in the late 20s or 30s, often precipitated by a crisis or dark night of the soul that shatters the illusions of youth and forces a deeper reckoning with existence. For others, it may not fully emerge until midlife or beyond, after decades of worldly experience have provided the raw material for wisdom to distill. The ancient traditions speak of the importance of preparation, of laying proper foundations through ethical living, study, meditation, and service before the higher initiations can safely occur. Just as you cannot build the second story of a house before the first story is complete, consciousness cannot skip steps in its evolution without creating instability and potential danger. Hall was particularly emphatic about this point, warning against the premature activation of spiritual powers through drugs, forced practices, or association with unscrupulous teachers. The genuine development of spiritual capacity is always organic, always integrated, always balanced with appropriate maturation of character and wisdom. What then does it mean to fully claim and embody this power once you recognize that you have entered this threshold? The answer lies not in grand gestures or dramatic demonstrations, but in the steady, patient work of living from your highest understanding moment by moment, choice by choice, day by day. Power in the spiritual sense is measured not by what you can do to impress others, but by what you have become in the depths of your being. It manifests as the capacity to remain centered and clear when others around you are swept up in panic or hysteria. It shows itself in the ability to extend compassion even to those who have harmed you, recognizing that hurt people, and that healing the cycle requires someone to respond with wisdom rather than reacting from woundedness. It reveals itself in the courage to speak difficult truths when silence would be easier, to stand for principles when compromise would be more convenient, to persist in the face of obstacles that would cause most people to give up. The truly powerful person is the one who has mastered themselves, who has brought their thoughts, emotions, and actions into alignment with their highest values, who has become a stable presence that others can rely upon, a source of light that continues to shine regardless of external circumstances. The ancient mystery schools were quite explicit that power and responsibility are inseparable, that those who receive greater capacities thereby incur greater obligations. The initiatory path is not for the faint of heart precisely because it requires you to take full accountability for your impact on the world, to recognize that your thoughts, words, and deeds ripple out far beyond your immediate awareness, affecting the collective consciousness of humanity and the subtle dimensions of reality. This is why the mystery schools screened their candidates so carefully, subjecting aspirants to tests of character before revealing deeper teachings. They understood that giving powerful knowledge to someone lacking moral development is like giving a razor to a child, dangerous to the individual and to everyone around them. When you enter your period of greatest power, you simultaneously enter a period of greatest responsibility. A time when the choices you make carry more weight and create more significant consequences than at any previous point in your development. The question then becomes, what will you do with this power as it continues to unfold in your life? Will you use it primarily for personal benefit, for creating a comfortable existence insulated from the suffering of the world? Or will you recognize, as all genuine spiritual masters have, that power is given to serve the evolution of consciousness in whatever way is appropriate to your unique talents and circumstances? This does not necessarily mean becoming a spiritual teacher or taking on a public role. Service can take infinite forms, from raising children with wisdom and love, to creating beauty through art, to conducting business with integrity, to offering a listening ear to someone in pain, to standing up for justice in your community, to simply embodying peace and radiating that energy into a world desperately hungry for it. The key is that your life becomes an offering, a conscious participation in the great work of helping consciousness awaken to itself throughout the cosmos. As we draw toward the close of this exploration, I want you to understand something crucial. If you have recognized yourself in these signs, if you have felt that spark of recognition as we have moved through these descriptions, then you are indeed standing at the threshold of your greatest power. But threshold is the operative word here. Standing at the threshold is not the same as crossing it. You must make the conscious choice to step forward into this new phase of your existence, to accept the responsibilities it brings along with the capacities, to commit yourself fully to the path of awakening regardless of what sacrifices it may require. The universe will not force this upon you. Your soul will not compel you against your will. The choice must be freely made, and it must be made not once, but renewed continually through your actions and priorities. This is the essence of what the traditions call initiation, not a ceremony performed by an external authority, but a decision made in the depths of your own heart to align yourself with the highest possibilities of human existence, to become a conscious co-creator with the divine intelligence that animates all things. Know that you do not walk this path alone. Though it may sometimes feel that way, though the nature of the journey requires periods of deep solitude, you are in fact part of an invisible fellowship that stretches back through time immemorial and extends forward into futures yet to unfold. Every genuine seeker who has ever lived, every sage and saint and mystic throughout history, every person now walking this earth who has heard the same call that you are hearing, all of these comprise your true family, your soul tribe, the community of those who have chosen consciousness over unconsciousness, light over darkness, love over fear. When you need strength, draw upon the knowledge that countless others have walked this path before you and have left their wisdom as guideposts for those who follow. When you feel doubt, remember that the signs we have discussed do not lie, that if they have manifested in your life, then you are exactly where you need to be, learning exactly what you need to learn, becoming exactly what you are meant to become. The phase of greatest power is also paradoxically the phase of greatest humility. For as your consciousness expands, you become ever more aware of how much you do not know, how vast the cosmos is, how infinite the journey of awakening truly is. This humility is not self-deprecation, but rather accurate perception, recognition that you are simultaneously nothing and everything, simultaneously a finite being bound by time and space, and an infinite being connected to all that is. This is perhaps the ultimate paradox you must learn to hold, the recognition that you are powerful beyond measure, and yet that this power does not belong to you personally, but flows through you from a source infinitely greater than your individual self. You are the flute through which the divine breath creates its music, the prism through which the clear light of consciousness breaks into the spectrum of manifestation, the instrument through which the universe comes to know itself. May you walk forward with courage and wisdom, recognizing the signs that mark your path, embracing the power that is your birthright, and dedicating that power to the highest good of all beings. May you remember in your moments of doubt that the journey itself is the destination, that each step forward is a victory, that consciousness evolving through your particular experience is the whole point of existence. And may you never forget that the greatest power is not the power to control or manipulate, but the power to love unconditionally, to see the divine spark in every being, to recognize that separation is illusion, and that in truth we are all one consciousness exploring itself through an infinite variety of forms. This is the ancient wisdom, the perennial philosophy, the secret at the heart of all authentic spiritual traditions. This is what Manly Palmer Hall devoted his life to teaching. And this is the truth that now lives in you, waiting only for your recognition and embodiment to transform not only your own life, but to contribute to the transformation of our entire world.